The city lights blurred like streaks of gold and silver against the tinted windows of the limousine. Rain drummed softly on the roof, and inside sat Alexander Reed, the man everyone in New York called the Cold King. His suit was flawless, his watch gleamed like it cost a small country. But his eyes, they looked empty. He had just left a charity gala that he didn't care about, smiling at people he didn't like, shaking hands that meant nothing. He thought the night was over, until a small sound broke the silence. A faint tap-tap-tap on his window. At first he ignored it. The city was full of beggars, children trying to sell roses or tissues. But then he heard a small voice through the rain, trembling yet steady. "Mister, please." He turned his head. Standing on the curb was a little girl, soaked from head to toe, hugging a torn teddy bear. Her hair was plastered to her face, her shoes were muddy and her lips quivered. Before he could react, she whispered, barely audible, "You need a wife, and I need a dad." That sentence froze him. It hit him harder than any business loss ever could. Alexander lowered the window slightly, his breath fogging the glass. "Where's your mother?" he asked, his tone cool but uncertain. The girl blinked up at him, her eyes large and shining like dark glass under the streetlight. "She's gone," she said softly. "Mommy went to sleep with the angels." For a moment, time stopped. The rain, the city noise, even the hum of the car, everything went silent. He opened the door and stepped out, his expensive shoes splashing in puddles. The girl didn't move. She just hugged her bear tighter. He crouched to her level. "What's your name?" "Lila," she whispered. "Lila Morgan." That name, Morgan, hit him like lightning. It was the surname of a woman he once knew, a woman he had loved. And left, Clara Morgan. The memory of her face came rushing back, her laughter, her eyes that used to look at him with a mix of fire and kindness. 8 years had passed since he last saw her. He had left without a word, too consumed by ambition, too proud to believe her when she told him she was pregnant. He straightened slowly, trying to breathe. "Do you know who I am?" Lila nodded. "Mommy had a picture of you. She said you were the man she loved once." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a crumpled photograph. Alexander took it with shaking hands. It was a younger version of him, standing beside Clara, his arm around her waist. He remembered that day, the way she smiled at him, the way he promised he'd come back, and never did. The driver approached, confused. "Sir, is everything all right?" Alexander didn't answer. He just said, "Open the door." "She's coming with us." The girl looked startled. "But I don't want to cause trouble." "You're not," he said quietly. "You're coming somewhere safe." Inside the limo, Lila sat nervously, her tiny hands clutching her teddy bear. She watched him like she was studying him, trying to understand if he was the man her mother had told her about. Alexander leaned back, staring at the rain outside, but his heart wasn't calm. Every second with her brought back memories he'd buried under work and wealth. After a long silence, Lila asked, "Do you live alone?" He nodded slightly. "Yes." She tilted her head. "That's sad." A smile tugged at his lips, the first real smile in years. "Why do you think that's sad?" "Because everyone needs someone to say goodnight to," she said, her voice drowsy but honest. "Even big people like you." Her words stung in a way nothing else could. When they arrived at his mansion, she gasped. "It's like a castle," she whispered, eyes wide. He led her inside, handed her a towel, and told the housekeeper to make her something warm to eat. As Lila ate soup at the massive dining table, her feet barely touching the floor, Alexander stood at the doorway watching. He couldn't believe how small she looked, how much she looked like Clara. Later that night, when she fell asleep in the guest room, Alexander sat by the window of his study, holding the photo she'd given him. His chest ached with a pain he thought he'd forgotten how to feel. Could she really be his daughter? Had Clara been telling the truth all along? He had everything, power, money, respect. But suddenly, none of it mattered. In that moment, he realized something that terrified him more than any business failure ever could. He didn't know how to be a father. And yet, for the first time, he wanted to try. Outside, thunder rolled over the city as he whispered into the dark, "Clara, I found her." But he didn't know that finding Lila was only the beginning of a redemption he never saw coming. When Alexander Reed woke up the next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, but something inside him felt different. For years, he had opened his eyes to silence, the hum of machines, and the cold order of his routine. But now there was a sound, a faint humming, a childish melody echoing from down the hall. It was Lila singing to herself as she fed the goldfish in the living room. That simple, innocent sound filled his mansion with something he hadn't felt in years: life. He stood in the doorway watching her, hair still messy from sleep, humming to her teddy bear while explaining how the fish must be lonely too. His chest tightened. He had been surrounded by people all his life, assistants, board members, shareholders, yet none of them had ever made him feel less alone than that little girl did in one morning. But the peace didn't last long. A knock on the door shattered it. His housekeeper announced, "Sir, there's someone from social services here." "They say it's about the child." Lila froze. The color drained from her face. The woman from social services introduced herself politely, but Alexander could already feel a storm rising inside him. "Mr. Reed," she said gently, "we understand you found Lila Morgan last night. She's been reported missing after her mother's death. Until her guardianship is verified, she'll need to be placed in foster care." "No," Lila whispered, shaking her head. "Please don't let them take me. You said I was safe here." Alexander crouched beside her, gripping her trembling hands. "You are safe," he said, his voice firm, his heart breaking at her fear. The social worker sighed. "I'm sorry, sir. Rules are rules. Unless you can prove guardianship, she must come with us." Something in him snapped. The man who once ruled boardrooms with steel-like calm suddenly spoke with raw emotion. "She stays with me," he said. "I'll handle the papers, whatever it takes." The social worker hesitated. "Do you even know her mother?" His throat tightened. "Yes," he said finally, his voice low. "I knew her better than anyone." After much persuasion and his signature on temporary custody documents, Lila was allowed to stay, for now. But Alexander knew this wasn't over. He needed answers. That night, after Lila fell asleep, he sat in his study surrounded by old photographs and files he had ordered his assistant to dig up. He found Clara's name, hospital records, old addresses, unpaid bills. Every document screamed of the life he had abandoned. A letter fell out of one of the files, his name on the envelope, written in Clara's delicate handwriting. He opened it with shaking hands. "Dear Alex, if you're reading this, I guess I didn't make it to see you again. I tried to find you, but you were always busy, always somewhere else. I don't blame you. I just hope one day, when our daughter meets you, you'll see what I saw, kindness, even if it's buried deep. Please, if you can, take care of her. She's brave, stronger than me, and she deserves to know she's loved." Tears blurred the ink as Alexander folded the letter. Guilt crashed through him like a wave. He had everything, yet he'd let the one woman who loved him most suffer alone. The next morning, he made a promise to Lila and to Clara. He took Lila to her old neighborhood, the one he had once considered beneath him. The walls were cracked, the air smelled of rain and dust. They stopped by a small flower shop. The owner, an elderly woman, recognized him immediately. "You're Clara's Alexander, aren't you?" she said softly. "She used to wait here every Friday, hoping you'd come back." Lila squeezed his hand, looking up at him with trust in her eyes. "See, Mommy said you were good once." He couldn't speak. He just knelt down, pressing his forehead against Lila's tiny hands, whispering, "I'm sorry for everything." From that day, Alexander changed. The mansion no longer felt like a fortress. He took Lila to school himself, attended her small art exhibitions, and even cooked breakfast on Sundays, badly. But she always laughed and said it tasted perfect. His staff began to whisper about how the ruthless CEO had become almost human again. But Alexander didn't care what anyone thought. The board meetings could wait. Lila's bedtime stories couldn't. One evening, while reading her favorite fairy tale, Lila looked up and asked, "Did you love my mommy?" He paused. His voice trembled when he finally said, "More than I ever knew. I just realized it too late." Lila smiled, her innocence cutting through his regret. "Then don't be sad," she whispered. "Mommy said if I ever find you, I should tell you she forgives you." The tears he had been holding back for years finally fell. That night, as Lila slept beside him, Alexander looked out the window at the stars and whispered into the darkness, "Clara, I'll protect her. I'll make you proud." But just as he began to find peace, fate had another twist waiting for him. A familiar voice from the past would soon knock on his door and change everything again.